Our species, Homo sapiens, evolved on the dry, baking savannas of Africa. But tens of thousands of years ago, migrating tribes walked out of that warmth and collided with a frozen hellscape. During the last glacial maximum, miles-thick sheets of ice swallowed 30% of the Earth. The human body is a delicate machine. It needs to maintain an internal temperature of 37 degrees Celsius to properly function. Drop an early human into negative 40-degree winds, and their blood begins to freeze. The brain slows down, organs fail, and death arrives in under 10 minutes. To survive, they relied on fire. A burning hearth stabilized their core temperature, but more importantly, it allowed them to process their food. By cooking raw meat over open flames, humans could absorb 3 times as many calories, effectively outsourcing the heavy work of digestion to the heat of the fire. And they needed those calories desperately. Ice cores from this era revealed that atmospheric CO2 levels hovered around 180 parts per million. Plant life struggled to photosynthesize in those conditions, meaning edible vegetation was virtually non-existent. Foraging was no longer an option. Survival meant hunting. This chart shows why hunting small game in deep snow was an equation that ended in starvation. A hunter chasing a fast-moving rabbit through knee-deep snow burns roughly 1,500 calories. If successful, that tiny carcass yields only 700. They were eating, but they were still losing the mathematical war for energy. There was exactly one way to balance the ledger. They had to target the woolly mammoth. A full-grown adult weighed 10 tons and carried 2,000 kilograms of meat. One successful kill could feed a tribe of 40 people for 3 solid months. Defeating the cold required extreme caloric density. Humans were forced by pure mathematics to hunt an armored giant. The problem was piercing that armor. A mammoth carried a 1-inch thick hide layered tightly over 4 inches of dense blubber. When hunters threw standard wooden spears at these walking mountains, the weapons simply snapped or bounced off the thick skin. Direct confrontation was suicide. So hunters observed the herds and discovered a mechanical flaw. A 10-ton animal relies entirely on solid ground. Force it into deep snow or soft mud, and the beast loses 30% of its speed. Its massive weight becomes an anchor. To exploit this, humans upgraded their arsenal. They abandoned river stones and began fracturing volcanic obsidian. By meticulously chipping away the edges, they engineered a spear tip with a razor-sharp, glass-like edge. They also carved a specific groove, a fluted base, into the bottom of the stone. By heating birch bark to create a thick black tar, they glued the stone head into the wooden shaft. This prevented the spearhead from snapping off the moment it hit the mammoth's thick hide. By refining stone and perfecting adhesives, hunters created a weapon capable of piercing a 4-inch layer of blubber. It was a victory of technical precision over raw physical power. The hunt itself started days before the animals even arrived. Working in narrow, rocky valleys, hunting parties excavated massive pits in the permafrost. They lined the bottom with thick leather nets, then covered the top with branches and a thin sheet of snow, creating an invisible trap. When the herd entered the valley, the hunters weaponized panic. They ignited torches, clashed stones together, and screamed as they rushed the animals. The sudden burst of light and noise terrified the mammoths, triggering a chaotic stampede. In the frenzy, the herd's tight defensive circle broke down. The hunters specifically targeted the chaos, waiting for an older, slower, or weaker mammoth to fall behind the main group. Once isolated, they used the torches to steer the panicked animal. With fire blocking its escape routes, the mammoth had exactly one open path. It sprinted forward, stepped onto the camouflaged branches, and plummeted deep into the earth, immobilized by its own weight. This wasn't just a story. Archaeologists have uncovered the evidence. In places like Toltepec, Mexico, scientists excavated massive, hand-dug trenches containing the remains of over a dozen mammoths, packed tightly together in the soil. By manipulating animal psychology and re-engineering the terrain, humans inverted the natural order. They used the landscape itself to become apex predators. Killing the mammoth was only the first phase. Within hours, the heavy scent of blood drifting on the frozen wind would attract apex scavengers. Packs of dire wolves and saber-toothed cats were closing in. Dragging 10 tons of dead weight back to a cave was impossible. The hunters performed on-site butchering, rapidly stripping the meat from the bone. The -40-degree air acted as a natural deep freezer, preventing the meat from rotting for months. Every single piece of the animal was extracted. The thick blubber became fuel to keep their fires burning for weeks. The heavy hides were scraped, treated, and sewn into extreme weather clothing and thick tent covers. Even the skeleton was repurposed. In places like modern-day Ukraine, early humans took the massive ribs, leg bones, and 15-foot tusks and interlocked them. They built entirely new residential structures out of the mammoth's anatomy to block the sub-zero wind. This delicate balance eventually collapsed. 12,000 years ago, the planet's temperature spiked. The ice sheets melted, and the specific grasses the mammoth relied on disappeared. Combined with highly coordinated human hunting, the species reached a breaking point. The strategies developed to solve the mammoth problem, collaborative labor and specialized toolmaking, ensured our ancestors survived the coldest era in human history. They were no longer just reacting to the environment, they were beginning to control it.